Today, the Union Loom Works custom rug loom gets a little refurbishing. Welcome to Hack a Week. In part one, we pulled all the warp off from the loom and looked it over, explained a few things about it so you were a little more familiar with it. In this episode, we want to start doing some cleanup, tightening up some of the bolts, get this thing so it's not so rickety anymore. See if we can get rid of some of the rust that's going on things. Get it functional so that it's ready to be warped up. So let's get started. First thing we're going to tackle are the braces and heddles. These are the braces. These pieces here and this whole framework is called a brace. These little things are the heddles. That's where the warp runs through. Right through that tiny little hole right there, if you can see it. Each one of these is a piece of wire that's twisted at the top, and it's got a slight twist in it as it comes down. Then it's twisted, it's got a little loop, and it goes all the way down to the bottom, and it's on the bottom part. These are a little rusty, but they're usable. There's a few of them that are a little bit bent. I'll show you a couple of those here. Right here, they're slightly bent, and that's not so bad. We can straighten those out. And the reason I want to use these is because they're 12 inches long. From here to here is how you measure the length of the heddles. And so on these braces, they're 12 inches. Common sizes are like 9, 9.5, 10.5. So I can't get brand new ones that are actually this size. So I'm going to just reuse these. But I need to clean all this stuff up. There's a light surface rust on everything. It makes it kind of difficult for these to move around when we're going to warp it up. So what I'm going to do is in place right here on the loom, I'm going to see if I can just move all these aside and clean off some of this rust with maybe just some lightweight sandpaper, perhaps a little fine wire brush. And then I may get after it with some OSPO, which is more or less, I think, phosphoric acid, this stuff. What it is a rust converter, and it turns it into iron phosphate instead of iron oxide. Iron oxide is basically iron, the steel in iron that has lost an electron, and it starts to fall apart more or less, and what happens then is it turns into iron oxide. So we're going to turn it into iron phosphate. It'll probably turn it a little bit dark, but what it'll do is neutralize that rust layer so it won't rust anymore, essentially. And it may do a little bit of that too to the reed. The reed is in pretty good shape, no weird bends or anything in it. It just needs a same kind of cleanup where we get a little of that surface rust off. After we get done with that, we're going to go around and replace a few bolts, tighten things up. It's pretty rickety right now. The whole thing just kind of wants to rack out real easy, but with a good tighten up on every single nut and bolt, I think we'll get back to where this thing is pretty solid again and quite usable. And once we're done with that, then we can adjust this brake bar, which has got these little catch things down here that this one's completely loosened up. The one down there on the other end, you can see it's got this little tooth that catches on right there. If I can make it happen. You see how it moves, and then it's free to move. It goes like this, holds it in place. So first thing I'm going to do is move these all over to one side, all of the wire heddles. They don't slide very easy, so I've got to do it a little bit at a time. Once I get them all moved over to one side, then I can get after these pieces and clean off some of the rust. And so then they'll move a bit easier. You can see there's just a light surface rust on here. And I've got a stainless steel wire brush. Maybe you can see it on camera. There's like a kind of a powder coming off from these of iron oxide. In fact, I can already smell it. I need to put on a dust mask. Not good stuff to breathe. So I'm just going to continue through all of this till we get all of these nice and clean. Okay, that's one. It took about, I don't know, 15 minutes or so. Got most of the rust off, and then on the heddles I just kind of did this. See if I can brush off just a little bit of the stuff. And move on to the next one. On the front brace, here's some of the bent ones I was talking about. But they're really not that hard to straighten out. I mean, you just literally straighten them out with your thumb. It's pretty simple. There you go, that one's straight. Just a matter of meticulously going through with each one and getting them straight again. Well, I've got most of the rust rubbed off from here with a wire brush, so now I'm going to take a little bit of OSPO and a rag, rubber gloves, by the way, and we'll just saturate this rag pretty good, rinse it out where it doesn't drip, and we're just going to gently wipe a little bit of this onto all of the steel parts. It's already just kind of lifting off some of the rust as I go. You can see, taking some of the stuff away. I'm going to try to keep it off the wood as much as I can. Now, all of the wire heddles are a little tricky because, well, they're just kind of they're hard to do anything with individually. So I think if I just spread them out a little bit at a time and then take the rag and just kind of move up and down on them like so, and that'll do the trick. Just want to convert all of that iron oxide to iron phosphate. So we just kind of stop the whole rust thing in its tracks. All right, we're done. That took about an hour and a half, probably, but it looks a lot better. It's like not rusty anymore. Just wiped away all the rust and converted it to iron phosphate. So I'm just gonna let this sit overnight. It'll probably turn kind of a gray whitish color as it dries out. You see some of it is already kind of doing that, and then I can kind of go back over it later and just rub it down with maybe some Scotch-Brite to clean it up a little bit. I did the handle, I did the entire reed, so that's looking pretty good, and all the chains have been done. Everywhere where there was a little bit of rust, I just brushed or wiped a little bit of that stuff on. Be careful getting it on cement. It'll actually just start eating right into the cement. I wipe that up with some water. What do you think, boys? The boys approve. Yeah, Figaro. So that's about it for right now. I'm gonna let that sit overnight and then we'll get back at it some more tomorrow. So this has sat overnight, everything's dried out. It really didn't change to gray very much, but all the rust is neutralized, which is good. This morning I spent a little time counting heddles on each one of the braces, and in this section right here there's 90, there's 102 in this section, there's 76 in this, etc., etc. And let's see, I've got some numbers written down. I have 542 heddles. And across the back here on the warp roller there are 18 stations, and down below here there's places for 30 spools of warp thread. And if you put 30 spools of warp thread on here, let's see, on the reed is 534 dents, so you could put 534 pieces of warp through there, or as they're called, ends. Each piece of warp is called an end. But if you did that, you would be weaving something that's wider than the distance between here and here. They said this is a 45-inch wide loom, but really you can do about a 44-inch wide carpet maximum. And if I go with
28 spools on there, and then I run them up here and wind them on here, 28 on here, 28 on here, 28 on here as I wind them up. And then what that'll do is give me enough to do a 42-inch wide carpet. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. That'll be in part 3 when we get this all set up and warped up. In fact, today I ordered 28 spools of cotton warp. So, what's next? We have got a few things to work out here on the cloth roller. This pawl is okay because it's the one that holds it in place. So as you're winding up your rug as you go, it can't go backwards. But this one here has an issue. It got bent at some point. This little teeny lever right here got bent and needs to be straightened out. So let's see if we can take care of that next so that this will move freely. So this is probably a pretty straightforward fix. All I need to do is bend this back so it's not bound up again. But it's a pretty stout piece of metal. Stuff was made with better metal back in the day. In other words, a long time ago. There we go. That's pretty much all it took was that. So now what happens is you use this lever to take it up, and it winds around that way as you're producing the rug or cloth. And then it catches on this pawl, and then this comes back. So you've just got this nice little ratchet. So that takes care of that. That was easy. Now we'll tackle the brake lever for the warp roller, which needs to be set up right. Right now, it's just kind of all over the place. As I've mentioned earlier, these two pieces right here need to be anchored in place properly, and they need to be set up at the right angle so that when you move the lever into a position where it's anchored up here, the warp roller is free to move. And you put it that way when you're winding warp onto it. And there's a handle that goes in here, which is missing. It's not uncommon for the handle to be missing. We're going to make one of those later. So let's get these adjusted. The first thing I need to do is loosen this one, which it's a 3/8 wrench. It fits that. Okay, that's loose. Now back over to the right side of the loom, and we're going to take the brake lever and move it up and anchor it in this position so it's caught on this little tab right here. So that's the neutral position. Now we need to adjust this so that the roller can move freely. Right now I think it's in a position where, yes, this clears right here. So that's in a position where this can move freely in both directions. Maybe back just a little bit the other way. Right about there. See, right now it's just completely loose, so I need to get my wrench and get a little bit of some tension on it. I also need to line it up with the wheel a little better. So we're going to adjust it right about there. Tighten it down good, and let's give this a spin. Yes, it moves okay. Do the same thing now to the other side. It's just clearing the wheel teeth. Tighten it right there. Okay. Now when I release the lever, there's enough play in it to release it. And I bring it down. And what that does now is locks this in place. So when I put tension on the warp, as I do my weaving, and I take it up on the cloth roller. I'm gonna back up a little so you can see the thing in action. It catches and stops. Now it's time to tighten every single nut and bolt on here, and there's 1 or 2 bolts I want to replace. Right now I have a temporary bolt in there. It's a bit too long. I've got some new ones over here. I think this one is this is a 3.5 inch. I bought some 4.5 inch bolts, and they're a little too long, but the 3.5 should be about the same as the original bolts. You can see one of them down there. Over on the other side, 1 bolt has been replaced here with a different one, and I think that one is actually a little bit smaller. I think that's a 5/16 bolt, and it needs to be a 3/8 bolt. So we'll swap that one out too. There's a really cool old-timey hardware store right next door to my shop, Resto Euro Auto Service. And they actually sell square nuts. They still have these in stock, and that's what this thing is put together with, is carriage bolts and square nuts, old school. So let's get replacing a few bolts. Let's see, we'll get this one first. Tap this other one out and put the other proper sized one back in. Give that a little tap to seat it into the wood. Put a large washer on there and the square nut. We'll come back and tighten it later. I'll go ahead and get that one on the other side now too. All right, every single nut and bolt. Here we go, tighten them all up. Well, that's already a lot better. Well, it's certainly a lot better. Like I mentioned, it doesn't move around nearly as much. And I just still need to get one more nut for back here. So I think I'll get a few more of the square nuts just to keep it all the same as it was original. Let's see. Next thing we got to do is replace these 2 dowels on the warp roller. Pretty much just a simple matter of drilling out the hole, putting a new dowel in there with some glue. As it turns out, I've got this package of dowels that are colored, and the 3/8 ones are already green. Perfect. Okay, let's see how accurately I can do this. I'm gonna use a flat bottom bit because I can get in the center easier that way. Keep it as straight as I can, and not quite in the center. That looks pretty good. Alright, let's try to stay as straight as we can here. Wood smell. This wood probably came from the Adirondacks because, according to what I've read, they used local wood, and it was in Boonville, New York, in the Adirondacks, 30 miles from where I grew up. Okay, that felt like I hit the bottom. That's one. check the fit. Not bad. Now let's see, let's cut this one to size. Mark how deep it goes. We'll get a measurement of how tall it needs to be, including the point, about 1 3/4 of an inch above the surface. Okay, I've got this chucked up in my vertical wood lathe, otherwise known as a drill press. Other folks out there have done this too, including Emily Velasco. Just using a wood rasp. Ta-da! One down, one to go. Okay, a little bit of wood glue. Put just a little bit in the hole, some on the dowel. A little twisty twist. Shove it in there. Wipe off the excess glue with a wet rag. Looks pretty good. Got the heights about the same. How's it look for straight? Not bad at all. Last thing I need to do is put some pegs here for the warp thread spools. They go right here in these holes. There's 30 of them all together. I'm probably just going to use 28. But they are 3/16 in diameter, and I have some 3/16 round stock here that I need to cut. They go in about 5/8 of an inch, so I'm going to cut them at 6 inches each. That'll leave me about 5 3/8 poking out. I've got my piece marked off in 6-inch sections. Safety glasses and ear muffs because I'm using a 4.5-inch cutoff wheel. You know, I suppose I should get this paper towel roll out of the way because sparks. And I have seen things catch on fire from the sparks from a cutoff wheel. Got them all cut. Now I need to clean up the ends on the grinder because they have a little burr on them. Now we have the burrs gone. One last pass with the wire wheel to make sure everything's nice and smooth. "30 pegs ready to be installed." Okay, we're just going to tap these in with a hammer. I'm going to put in all 30. Even though I'll probably only use 28 most of the time. There we go. I can see that the warp guide is going to need a little bit of adjustment, but we'll worry about that, I think, once we get spools on here, because this probably got a bit bent up in its travels moving around over the years. But for right now, I think we're good enough. Just bend it a little bit, and we can make our final adjustments once we get the spools here. One last thing. I made this handle. Only took a couple minutes, didn't bore you with all the details, just bent it up in the vise, kind of welded up this so that it's spaced properly for that nice little hole right there, and look at that. Goes right in, just put a simple bead of weld there to stop it, and it works great. Ta-da!
I think that's about it. I'm really pleased with the restoration here. Got most of the rust taken care of. Really glad I can keep the heddles. They're all in good shape. Got those all sorted out. The rust is gone. Things slide back and forth here on the braces quite well. One more thing I need to do is put the front and back sticks on. One goes here on the cloth roller. The other one goes back here on the warp roller. We've got the warp, the cloth take-up wheel working okay. And we've got a handle back here on the warp roller that we didn't have before. I'm gonna leave the hinges alone on the treadles. They're okay. I don't really need to replace them. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. What else? I've got the thread ordered up. I found some for about $5.20 a roll instead of nearly, what was it, $15 plus a roll on Amazon for the 50-50 polyester and cotton stuff. There's 800 yards on a roll, but I need 28 rolls. That was over $400. The other website I got them for a total of 130 something. They'll be here soon, and in the next video, we'll dress the loom. We'll run the warp through everything, get it all ready to go, and we'll start weaving a rag rug. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you want to donate, go to the Hack a Week website and click on the donate button. Until next time.